Circle, and welcome to another glorious episode of Is It Shit? Today, we're going to start with the Talons of the Emperor's first units. Obviously, I want to go through all these units one by one, a bit more in depth, and describe what's good and what's bad about them, and we'll see where we end up from there. So, today, the first unit we're actually going to be covering is the Legio Custode Sentinel Guard Squad. For 180 points, you get 3 of the sword and board guys. I don't like the sword, but people already know that. And the look of the unit's beside the point in this series. The unit's weapon skill 5, in fact, basically everything's 5, except the wounds and attacks is 2, the leadership is 9, and the save is 2+. You get 3 guys in the unit for 180 points, so do the math, 60 points a model. The war gear includes a Sentinel Warblade, close combat weapon, refractor field, Precedium Shield, plasma and crack grenades, and Custode armor. Which means they've got a 2+ save and a 5+ invul for those playing at home. The Legio Custode special rule grants them preternatural skill, which means that if you weapon skill is greater than your enemies, you get +1 initiative. Your weapon skill 5. Most enemies in Heresy are weapon skill 3 and 4. So chances are you're getting that +1 initiative, which is going to make you initiative fucking 6, which is more than most Marine HQs. The Sodality. The Sodality means that the entire unit can maintain a coherency of 3 inches instead of 2 inches, to represent them being more of individual soldiers. Lastly, they have Inviolable Psych. They are immune to fear and pinning tests, and get to re-roll failed deny the witch attempts. The unit does not suffer penalties to its leadership when taking morale checks. So it's basically Stubborn 2.0, but better. The bulky rule, of course, means they count as 2 models, not 1 when embarked on transport. The Crusader rule means that I believe they sweeping advance an extra additional inch. I would have to double check that. If I did my research beforehand, I would have double checked that. But it's one of those rules that hardly ever comes up, so. Now, the last special rule I have was Shield Barricade. It means that when a friendly infantry unit is being targeted by range attacks which pass through the area occupied by a unit composed entirely of models with this special rule, they gain a 4+ cover save. So, if this unit is blocking line of sight to another unit slightly, the unit behind them gets a 4+ instead of a 5+ cover save. Again, it says the unit must have the Shield Barricade special rule. If you put it, say, a Tribune, Sister of Silence, anything like that in the unit, then obviously then it no longer has that rule, so technically it wouldn't apply. I just feel inclined to point that out. Now, they can take a Coronis Grav Carrier as a dedicated transport. That'll get its own video. It is a very good unit, however. However, it will only be if the squad number is 6 models or less, so keep that in mind. Your Sentinel Guard Squad may include up to 7 additional guard at 65 points each, so you're paying an extra 5 points per model after you get the basic squad. The entire Guard Squad may be equipped with any of the following options. Melter Bombs at 5 points each. Don't do it. Waste of points, especially with the FAQ, that means that you can only use 1 Melter Bomb at once. Array Shrikes. Array Shrikes are a special item of war gear. What they do is that if anyone deep strikes near you, and they strike within 12 inches of the squad that has them, they have to roll a d6 before they determine the result of the deep strike landing. On 4+, you suffer a deep strike mishap instead of landing. And this will even affect things like drop pods. It also gives them a targeting interface special rule that when you have the array shrikes in a unit and you're targeted by a weapon with the barrage type, the attacking player must roll an additional d6 for the weapon scatter and pick the highest 2 results. Do note that a hit is still a hit. Bear with me, guys, because this can be a bit to take in all at once. Now, any member of the Sentinel Guard Squad may replace a Sentinel Warblade with a Solarite Power Gauntlet or Solarite Power Talon plus 15 points. Whilst an expensive option, it is a good upgrade option. If you are going to fight Terminators, things like that, the Solarite Gauntlet is basically a Power Fist for AP1. The Solarite Power Talon is a Lightning Core, but better. I'm just going to double check the rules, because I want to get this right. It's actually a Power Core, which is Mastercrafted, and +1 Strength. So you'll be Strength 6 Lightning Core. You'll be ruining Marines on 2s with rerolls. So, oh no. You may also take a Magisterium Vexilia on the unit. The Magisterium Vexilia grants the unit Fearless. Check if it has any other rules here. Again, sorry, this is the first unit I'm really looking at in depth. Unfortunately, Custodes have a lot of war gear that modifies their stat lines and gives them a lot of special rules. And it does make it difficult, because you're constantly having to adjust the unit's stat line as you do a review. Now, the Magisterium Vexilia means you may reroll your failed leadership tests, and you gain fear. In addition, you may add +1 to the wound score calculated to see if any friendly unit with any models within 12 inches of any Magisterium Vexilia wins a combat in the assault phase. This bonus applies only once, so it means you can't stack 3 or 4 of these banners near each other and add 4 bonuses at once. Not something that'll go off too often, because you're either going to absolutely ruffle stomp in combat or not. Now, the last 2 things to cover off on the squad are the weapons. The Sentinel Warblade, which is the big hulking Ducati motorcycle of power swords. It's a strength user, AP3, rending specialist weapon. So you don't get a +1 attack or anything like that. So these models, except on the charge, will only ever have 2 attacks at AP3 and rending. They will also have a firing mode, thanks to the gun built into it, which is range 12, strength 4, AP5, assault 2, and hail of fire, which means they can snapshot at ballistic skill 2. The weapon is shit. Frankly, it's not as good as the other weapons, and yes, although you have rending, things like Terminators will just munch on this squad. They will just eat right into it. Something like Red Butchers is just to be fucking... they're terrifying to this unit. It is worth noting, however, the very last item of war gear is the Precedium Shield. Now, the Precedium Shield is probably the most broken thing in the Custodes army, especially on certain units. You see, you get to reroll your failed invulnerable saves, and enemies have a -1 to hit roll on you when you have one of these. Sure, you don't get the benefit from a 2-handed weapon, but you're weapon skill 5 in most of this army, so Marines are hitting you on like 4s already. Well, now because these shields are hitting you on fucking 5s. And if they do make it through with things like power axes, power fists, you get a 5+ invul thanks to your refractor fields, and you get to reroll it if you fail. Not fantastic, but on other units we'll cover off later on, it's fucking brutal. So